No, 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 no!
I'm gonna smash it. I'm gonna smash it.
No!
I'm gonna smash it.
No.
Look, do you know what 95% means?
Yes?
95% does not mean you miss 4 straight times before he cuts off your best character's head. It doesn't mean that. I'm gonna smash it.
No.
Wall, smash.
No. If you can't be a good sport when you're playing Battle Brothers, I'm going to uninstall it from your Steam library.
But smash, just...
No. No.
I'll be good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unqualified Experts. I'm your host, Braden Gardner.
And I'm your salty because I couldn't smash my laptop against the wall. Corrupt Overlord Shane.
And today, we're going to be going over some games that we love playing, but they have one little aspect in them that just makes us rage and hate them so much sometimes.
The games you hate to love, the games you love to hate.
So, we're each going to pick 3 games from our Steam libraries to discuss. I think it should be noted before we get too far in that we do actually enjoy playing all the games on both our lists. But this one thing within each of them just makes them incredibly frustrating sometimes. But they've got the right gameplay, storytelling, creative concepts to keep us coming back for more, despite some of the abusive tendencies of these flaws.
Yeah, there's still games where you would recommend them to certain people, but you would feel like you have to give 2 paragraphs of warnings before you do so.
Exactly. And in keeping with that, my number 3 entry is going to be a game that actually was recommended to us by Phil, and we've actually streamed it on Twitch, at least before the derecho and the internet went out, basically. And it's a super fun cooperative game, and we worked really well together to lay on railroad tracks and get from one end of the map to the depot at the other in Unrailed.
Mm-hmm.
Unrailed basically has up to 4 people coordinating the balance of laying tracks, harvesting materials to create tracks, manufacturing the tracks with said materials, keeping hazards from the map from getting in the way, and keeping the engine cool. And you can upgrade your train along the way to make some of these easier to manage. And the goal is just to see how far you can get across the countryside. However, there's one feature that really just can screw over a group, and you have literally no control over it. And if you're in a bad spot when it comes up, your run's basically over. And that's the autosave.
Yep. So it is a deceptively easy game. It is fun. It is a simple task. You're going from point A to an unforeseen point B, make the longest railroad. You'll deal with all the obstacles, get the supplies, and it's surprisingly fun. It's basic pixel art, but it really does work for the game. But that's the thing, there's the occasional autosave, and the trouble is sometimes you're stuck without enough supplies right before a robber shows up on the screen. Or you're stuck without supplies right before your train's about to speed up into the river. And if you don't have the right things there, or you stack supplies in a way where you blocked yourself out, that autosave is like the old NES again, where, oh look, Contra, you died. Oh look, you fell off the cliff again, you died. It's kind of the same thing.
Tons of fun, but we've actually seen the autosave basically mess our group up in a big way right around the volcano area. And we tried so hard to get through that, and it wasn't happening.
Yeah. It was just take your score and reset. And so it's a fun game. We still recommend it as a co-op. But man, that autosave, there has to be a better way to implement that or to be able to take a step back from that. And that's a good number 3 pick. So for my number 3 pick, it is Cultist Simulator. It is a very strange game. It is very unique if you haven't seen it on Steam. Basically, you are someone who, for whatever reason, you find little scraps of occultic knowledge that teach you magic is actually real. There, you can call on the eldritch gods. You can start a cult of your own and gain unimaginable power. And it's really unique because it's a card play system. Here's a card for your health. Here's a card for your reason. Here's a card that you put on these little squares that can represent your job, your dreams, what you're investigating in your free time.
I'm sold, as long as there are no other details.
Ooh, that is unfortunate.
Uh-oh. I don't like where this is going.
In the beginning, I have no problem with kind of the stumbling non-tutorial setup, because it really does mimic what that would be like, discovering a little scrap of information. Well, what do you do with this now? And you kind of have to test around to see where you can use it, where you can't. One mystery might lead to an answer, or it might lead to 4 different mysteries. It might lead to someone who will help you, or it might lead to that police officer known as a hunter who is all about getting his first witch to burn at the Inquisition. Problematic, but you are stumbling through these dangers in this discovery. And so that's not the issue, because that is a really cool setup for this game, and it works. The trouble, one, it gets overwhelmingly busy. You will be hitting the spacebar to pause constantly, because after one discovery or one dream or one event, you may realize you have 22 cards you now have to sort out. Are they benefits? Are they health? Are they funds? Did you not realize you're actually on trial right now, and you better come up with a good defense really quickly, because your game's going to end in 45.2 seconds. And that's really unfortunate. Your favor from the judge is 46.5. It's stuff like that where you can get really overwhelmed really quickly, even once you're discovered. And there's, even once you get the ins and outs of it to some extent, figuring out the actual magic, which should be the absolute stake of this game, because you're trying to be an occultist to gain powers, leveling up magic should not be the only part of the game that is super grindy and really difficult to figure out on a step-by-step basis. And unfortunately it is. And I've put about 60 hours into this game, and I feel like I've only had 2 runs where I actually had a legitimate, hey, I might get into the deep game with this opening cult. And having watched some other gamers who have played this even more, they say the same thing. The magic system is so grindy. Like, there are clear step 1s to step 2s to step 3s to everything else. And then you have that, plus 15 extra steps in the middle for figuring out little magic strengths. And it just doesn't make sense. It bogs down a game that has so much going for it. So the writing is great. The writing you get from clicking on the cards tells about, mysterious fairies and places where houses holding a secret. You learn about people coming after you because they want your power. The writing is fabulous. The card system, I'm not even a big card system. It works really well. But it gets super busy. And then you get to magic, which is so exciting because you finally get some powers. And you may find it takes 4 hours of grinding to get the 1 card you need to go from level 1 to level 2. Oh, and by the way, that spell, because you didn't know which route you were choosing, it becomes valuable at level 7.
Oh, good.
And so, I love Cultist Simulator, but man, that is rough. It's a game I want to give an A because it's so unique and well put together, but the system's so broken there, I just can't do it.
Yeah, and a lot of that all sounds great. Like, that all sounds like stuff I'd be right on board with, but having a system that's that difficult to navigate, I mean, you shouldn't have to fight against the internals of your game to get from point A to point B in a decent game most times, especially in one that is entirely contingent on you getting through all of the early steps to get to the late game in a particular fashion. Like, there are games that can do that reasonably well, but the steps from point A to point B are in a much shorter chain, kind of like Kindergarten or Kindergarten 2.
Yeah, and in the process of that, while you're doing all this grinding, you have to use your focus, you have to use your memory, you have to use these assets. The problem is you're still being hunted that whole time. So while you're grinding, if you put the cards in and you get an unlucky draw for whatever the new season is, your game's over. And that just makes a 4-hour grind even worse, because there's a very good chance, just by numbers, you're going to lose through no fault of your own at that point. Or you can make the grind go twice as long and go 8 hours to get through safely, and who has that type of time?
Yeah, and that kind of leads into what my number 2 pick is, because my number 2 game is a game that also tends to use timers to punish you. And don't get me wrong, it's a ton of fun to play outside of the fact that you have to deal with the timer. And while most of the games in this franchise have this flaw, the one that I'm picking specifically is Worms W.M.D. I hate that timer so much.
Worship the holy hand grenade, Brayden. Worship it.
Maybe make Callahan worship it, maybe? He is still a non-believer.
That is fair.
So, for those who aren't familiar with the Worms franchise, you're playing a bunch of cartoon worms with an incredible array of fantastical weapons that are designed just to create all kinds of murder and mayhem to both yourselves, the scenery, you name it. And Worms WMD has improved upon this formula by also giving you the ability to craft new weapons, so you can do some truly ridiculous things with that. But the maximum amount of time that you have to take a turn with some quirky, and I'm being very generous with that term, controls, is 90 seconds. You can't turn off the timer, you can't extend it beyond that particular amount of time, and all you can do is take away from that 90-second time limit per turn. Which on the one hand I understand, because it encourages an even more frantic game pace, but it's also extremely frustrating to spend 89 seconds setting up for your turn, only to realize you have 1 second to point whatever is at hand at the closest enemy and hope it works out for the best.
Yeah, and I can see that. And 90 seconds is usually more than enough, but one of the things Worms keeps from its original ones on the PlayStation back in the early 2000s is they do have kind of janky control movements.
And if you start in Siberia, you're boned.
Yeah. And so you miss that jump, you miss that grappling hook, you miss that one little thing that got you at the right space, and you can easily eat 20, 30 seconds up trying to get to that spot again. And so while it's not as big a deal for me, I can definitely see that being a problem for a lot of players, especially as you are learning the controls again in the beginning. And it's frustrating when you have a wide map and you're all the way on the other side, and 90 seconds just isn't enough time to get into range to do anything, but it's enough time to get into your opponent's range. So that is fair, though I would just say the proper answer for Worms WMD all the time is to worship the holy hand grenade.
It takes so long to get it, though. You have to wait so many rounds.
I know. No patience. So, speaking of a game that tries your patience, and one that I didn't even realize was actually a sequel to what a studio had done, Dead in Finland. Okay, survival game, Vikings, throwing in some combat. I mean, you got me one at that point. And I thoroughly enjoy this game. But man, there were some things where I could see how people would be really turned off by it. For one, it is moody. Not capital M, capital all caps, moody. And I get but, minor spoiler alert for those of you who are going to skip the tutorial anyway. You're chased from your home. Your ship is smashed, classic Viking Norse luck, and you end up on a deserted island, which unfortunately for you, very much is not deserted.
Oh.
Yup. And so as you're trying to save your family, build a settlement, raise a community, it sets a very depressing tone, and I get that works for the game. But they're setting the tone, and then there's that point by day 70 when you're like, I get it. The dad is depressed. His family is there after 3 months of making a settlement. He should not be getting depressed after every single action because this is hampering gameplay at this point. Which is one of my complaints. And it's unbalanced in some ways. And I'm not speaking of the RNG. Actually, among RNG games, this is probably about the best one I've found where it feels like it really does take into account skills and numbers and doesn't totally randomly screw you. course, there's always some bad luck, and that's part of it, especially in Norse game. You also even have the option of a corrective RNG, where if the random number screwed you over 4 straight games, it will give you 4 straight nice rolls to balance out the math to a reasonable level. I don't use it, because that does take away from his luck, but I like the fact it's an option. Especially based on my number 1 choice of this list, which we'll get to in a bit. But it doesn't change the fact that I think unbalanced is the best way to describe it in Finland. Some of the writing, because it's very text and plot heavy, is beautiful storytelling. Like, gives you kind of A+ type game. And then you get to another character or situation where your options don't make sense based on what you built, and it takes you right out of the immersion. And you go to a C-, D+ type game. And it almost feels like you have those two kind of crammed together in a way that never quite works out. So you'll go from one beautifully immersive, well-written scene to one where you're like, why does this family member keep making everyone depressed by saying bad jokes that no one's laughing at? It's really unbalanced. And some of the specific conversations and events, though they have to happen, their trigger can be random. And so if you had a really bad day where they were exhausted or a really bad day where they're depressed and you trigger the wrong event, it's game over. Your character dies in the middle of the night and the camp scatters. And I don't like that at all. Like, it's one thing to have bad luck because you decide to take a chance and you got bit. Great. When, we'll have the random event this day that could have been any of the first 30 days, even though it will end your game, it just, yeah, it's infuriating. And I don't believe in save scrumming, which is given as one of the strategies for this game. It's like, look, if you have to save scrum in danger of sounding unpopular, your game is not hard, it is not cool, it's not difficult, it is broken. Because that should not be a strategy you build a game around of, well, we're not going to fix this, so just keep going back to an older save until it works out. Like, no, give me a system where it works. And that can sound really harsh. And part of the reason I think that is for Dead in Finland is the parts of the game that are good are so freaking good that you get that much angrier when you run into a part that really ruins it for you. And in this case, I think that happens quite a bit. Like, the first building you build has to be the tavern. You're surviving on a wood island without food, water, with injuries and depression and fatigue. Why are you building a place to drink beer? Because it's the only way you can treat depression. It is not an intuitive thing. You have to figure that out or go online. And well, I get it. Norse thing, that's kind of cool. So often there's only one way to fix a certain problem you run into, and it creates really unnecessary choke points that distract you. It makes you do these really tedious, repetitive actions when you really want to be diving into the best part of what this game has to offer, which is quite a bit. And it's a shame.
Yeah, I agree. And games that do that can be incredibly frustrating to work through, especially when the grind really isn't necessary. And my number 1 pick kind of falls in that same category where there's a design decision that has added even more grind to an already fairly grindy game. But it's still one that I can't say I haven't enjoyed. I've sunk over 600 hours into it over the last year. And that's Destiny 2. Bungie has really put out one of the best first-person shooters I've played in recent years. Like, it reminds me a lot of the fun that I had playing through the original 2 Halo games. You have a wide variety of different types of weapons that do all sorts of outlandish things, a bunch of interesting worlds to explore, compelling stories, cool characters, lots of planets to wander to. It's a good time. And the grind in that game is in trying to acquire certain weapons and in trying to maintain your level. It's every 3 months or so when they have a new season, your maximum level cap goes up by 50 points. And along those leveling lines, you could also level the weapons that you had along the way. You could basically, if you had a weapon drop that had a higher level, you could fuse it into your old weapon and it would match the weapon that you fused its level.
Oh, nice.
So you could keep it along with you, and you wouldn't necessarily have to change out builds every 3 months. You could just do what you wanted to do, which was go and shoot aliens in space. Not a difficult concept. Unfortunately, Bungie has made the decision, starting with the season that comes out in November 2020, to implement a cap on the level that certain weapons get. Read any weapons basically that aren't being introduced as seasonal weapons for the last 4 seasons. And that means that a lot of weapons that you've worked hard to earn over the course of the game are going to become worthless in game modes that care about your level, which I kind of find frustrating on several axes. It took a long time to get some of those weapons, first of all, and while some of them are incredibly, incredibly busted, I'll be the first to admit that. And the weapons impacted by this, for those who aren't familiar, are those of purple and blue rarity, basically, not the exotic gold ones. But you could use buffs and nerfs on weapons in patches. Like, I feel like not doing that is a little lazy. I understand it would be hard because there are a ton of weapons in the game, but I don't like that because it kind of feels like you're taking them out of the game without taking them out of the game. And beyond that, it makes it really hard to take a break from Destiny because sometimes you want to take a few month break, and it's already going to be a pain when you come back to get your level back up to the maximum. That's already going to eat hours and hours of your time. And now you're adding in the grind to get the rolls that you want on specific guns on top of that, just to make sure that you have something you can use for a few seasons. Yeah, I'm not really about that. It's a lot of extra work, and it's kind of telling me how to have fun with the game, which I sort of resent. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be a great game moving forward. It doesn't mean it's not going to be fun to play periodically, but man, it's a real big slap in the face for me personally.
And that's unfortunate, because I know you really love Destiny. I know you've played that game quite a bit. I know a lot of our friends love that game for kind of the same reason. So you hate to hear something where it just kind of upends the table. It almost feels like someone trying to change the rules partway through. Oh, good pick. Sorry to hear about that, bud.
Yeah, me too, but maybe they'll change their mind later.
I mean, stranger things have happened. So, while Braden may have stopped me from smashing my laptop against the wall because of my top pick here, do not let that keep you from smashing the like and subscribe button. It is a free action that helps our channel immensely, and plus, get enough of them, maybe then Braden will let me smash my laptop. It'd have to be a high number, but I bet we can get there.
We'll talk about it in post.
So obviously, and to anyone who has played this game for any amount of time, this should not be a surprise. It is Battle Brothers, a game I heard people talking about for 2 to 3 years before trying it out, promptly sunk about 300 hours of gameplay into in just a couple of months, and understand all the love and all the insane fury, and they are both justified. So let's get right to the elephant in the room with this one. The RNG for this game is the most infuriating of any I have seen or even remotely heard of. It feels like so often you level up your characters even to the late mid-game, and it just doesn't matter. Stuff is going to happen regardless. The number of times I've watched the computer hit 4 shots that had a 10% chance or less of hitting in a row before I missed 3 or 4 90% chance to hit shots in a row. It happens so often that it's just part of the gameplay at this point. Like, the ongoing memes and jokes are even that the RNG is going to screw you, so you have to figure that into your strategy. Which is infuriating, because it's such an interesting design, it is such an interesting game. It plays so well, and I don't mind a TPK when it's like, oh, what's that there in the shadows? Oh, that is an undead fallen hero. Oh crap, we're gonna die. Okay, I made a decision. I'm gonna pay for it. Perfectly okay with that type of gameplay. But the number of times where you see some really suspect misses in a row, And you can just say, okay, we're going to miss the next 4 attacks, because that lets their almost dead guy with 1 hit point live. He'll cut off the head of our favorite character, who has the most levels up. And then we will hit every attack the next round, no matter how obscenely stupid. I even tested this out a few times. Okay, that happened for the 4th time. I'm only taking 10% chances to hit shots. They all hit. It happens so often, you can't call it random anymore. And when you look, they even brag, it's not RNG for Battle Brothers. It is adjusted RNG.
Ooh.
And that leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. Like, look, there's a point in this game where there are some great YouTube channels where if you played for 2,000 in-game days as opposed to the 150 you usually need for a late-game event, you can become invincible where they can't touch you. And it's funny watching one guy kill 60 orcs by himself. But that's okay. If you want to do an open world and keep doing that, that's fine. Having an active RNG that screws you type situation, it's... Utter randomness is one thing. To just be throwing numbers and randomness out the window to force a death or force a difficulty or force a character loss, it's stupid. And it goes right back to the safe scrumming is an absolute bullplop thing. And I feel like a lot of early game Battle Brothers relies on that if you want the same base characters moving forward. And look, if the strategy is you're going to lose most of your original guys and upgrade to new ones, that's perfectly fine, and that actually is what you should do most of the time in this game. But it is one thing to have a random death that happens. To have how did we miss 14 attacks in a row? And then you can see it coming from a mile away as your guy gets cut to pieces, who has the heaviest armor and is virtually untouchable. When you can start calling it consistently, it takes away so much from the game that it's infuriating. And I get that, yes, don't smash your laptop against the wall, just save scrum. It straight out tells you Iron Man mode with the undiscovered map is how this game is meant to be experienced. Well, if that's the case, then not having saves doesn't allow you to save scrum. So why are you running a system that's designed around having to do that to save your hide? That's just asking for the same type of anger. And to me, it's doubly infuriating because without that random BS, it's a super challenging game. It's super fun. It's super addictive. There are so many different storylines that can play out in special events. You could throw in extra stuff. There's nothing better than calling yourselves the Glorious Bastards, and the first city you get to recruit, there are 2 really cheap bastards kicked out of their house you get to recruit. It's like, right, I'm point. Or call yourselves the Socialists that refuse to hire anybody except farmers, miners, and fishermen. It's, look, at that point you know you're losing guys, but it's funny, it's entertaining, and it's just, there are so many ways to play this. It is so replayable. The DLCs are fantastic. The extra content they've added are just top-notch. So to have, I'll say, a broken RNG system as a main feature, why? It is the ultimate example of a game I absolutely love to freaking hate, but it's so addictive I keep coming back to it.
Yeah, I admit I'm still stuck on adjusted RNG.
Right.
And just like, if that isn't the literal definition of changing the rules, I don't know what is.
You're doing well right there. Be a shame if your top character got beheaded.
Thanks, I hate it.
Yeah, that. And, it's one of those things where I don't know I'd recommend the game to a lot of people. But I will fully be happy to go into an extended complaint section, aka Bitch Fest, with you if you buy it. And I get the appeal. It is a solid game. It is fun. There is a reason you pour hundreds of hours into it. But the adjusted RNG is not... It's not a benefit. It just absolutely isn't. So that's our list. Those are games. We love them. We hate them. We have mixed emotions about them. So what are the ones on your guys' list? Let us know in the comments. Do you think some of these games are perfect and we completely missed the mark? Is there an obvious one that should have been top of our list? How many likes should we get before we allow Shane to smash the laptop into the wall? these are valid questions. We want to hear about we want to hear about it in the comments below.
Absolutely. And until next time, great gaming.
Great gaming.
If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.